Welcome to the Dr. Donna podcast, here on the Experience of the Soul podcast channel. Innovative, evidence-based recovery that helps to identify intergenerational trauma, allowing for freedom and embracement of the healing process. Today, episode 122, Home is Within You, Part 1, with special guest, author Nadia Davis. And now your host, Dr. Donna Bevan-Lee.
I'm Dr. Donna, and welcome to my podcast. Today, I have a really special guest with me. She has published a book called Home is Within You, and my guest is Nadia Davis. She has quite an amazing story to share with us, and her recovery, her life now. It's a very good story, and she has a lot of really positive suggestions or what she's doing now to take care of herself, and I'm very excited to have her here today. So Nadia, you have an incredible story, and it's one of survival that includes childhood trauma, which we've been talking about here for years, a near-fatal car accident, addiction, which we've also discussed, physical and emotional abuse, which we discuss on a regular basis, and worst of all, intense public shaming, which I have referred to in this podcast as there's nothing like public humiliation to take you right down to the bottom. And from what I understand in your story, this sounds like it was a crossroads for you. So would you mind sharing your story with us? And I'll ask questions as we go along.
Thank you. Thank you for the work you do. I don't know if I could put a bow on it or box it all together yet. The most important thing that I want people to know is that I shared my story to take a stand against that public shaming so that a part of it, somebody out there that's struggling in the dark, that they could relate to it. And so I owned it. And my story is a long, arduous path that included treatment, jail, hospitalizations, relapses, and a ton of what I call a running to standstill mode, in this grin and bear it mode that was set in stone as a child when I did not learn that I was born of and still had a core innocence and truth. I entered the human race enters the grin and bear it mode after some childhood trauma, some sexual molestation, and racial bullying that kind of combined a message in my head. And I had a very active household, the youngest of 7 kids, and a lot of music, 7 kids in 9 years. There was a lot going on. And when things started to happen, I literally replicated the understanding that my mind had created about life, that it's me against the world, and I'm in this box called Little Nadia, by hiding in the closet. So in the belief that I was just a body and my thoughts, I replicated kind of that mode of thought, of survival, by hiding in the closet whenever a trigger came up, a trauma trigger came up. And so what got me out was this like fighting spirit of a belief in the warmth and the love in the world and good in people. And I sought to save the world from a very early age on. That's what like kept me going. And so in that grin and bear it mode, it's praised. It was, okay, student government, Amnesty International, food drives, a ton of different projects throughout grade school. And that landed me at UCLA. A lot of trauma triggers were coming up in the first 18 years of my life. Again, I always managed it with this fighting spirit, believing in the good in the world. and justice. And my father was very much part of inspiring that, and my mother. But I saw myself in my dad. And so I went to UCLA, and in that grin and bear it mode, I thought I had life handled, you know? I thought, oh, I'm at UCLA, I'm thriving in all these different projects, and bam, I was the victim of a violent rape, and it really just molded again the messages in my mind. You are just a body and just your thoughts, and the trauma that I now understand shaped me really put me in a further disassociated mode. But again, the mind had me get up in this, I am Nadia Davis, and this is your value, this is your worth. And I picked myself back up, the childhood trauma that had happened. It was a molestation in a doctor's office, and then the racial bullying, some of the senses of abandonment and really no emotional connection as a child. Like all of that, again, was in this survival mode. And eventually I was in a middle ground. I had no drinking problem. I had no addiction problem. And I entered law school. So again, you're saving the world. I thought that my whole life was ahead of me. I thought, okay, I'm getting closer to following in my father's footsteps, who was an orphan field worker and became an attorney. His story is just amazing and is the whole first chapter of the book. And then bam, he passed away, and what represented all the good and the light and the hope in the world was just stolen. And I really, really struggled to find hope and light and that will in me again. And what happened was a caretaking of my mom, I'm going to prove, everybody, my father's spirit is alive. And so again, that survival instinct just came in and got me up and going. It was extremely disassociated. And what I mean by that, I just don't want to throw out a term, but I had no connection to my feelings. I had no way of identifying at all when past triggers of fear or the self-judgment were coming up and blocking me from my connection to a higher power, let alone to his spirit. And so I would just cry driving to law school. And I moved back to the city that he grew up in that was memorializing much of his legacy, and became the little Wally in his community. His name was Wallace R. Davis. And again, just kept going. Yet I was struggling. I was really, really struggling inside. I then started representing an innocent kid whose story, fighting for truth, is also in the book. That's Arthur Carmona. And then that surrounded me with a vast community that of love and just a representation of what I saw was good in the world. And then I suffered, bam, a near-death car accident and had to start all over again. And in those moments is really where I saw the only truth that matters. And that's that we're infinite beings, whole, divine, and complete, and that nothing changes that. I was brought back to life. I wasn't breathing when they found me. And that entire recovery journey to learn to walk again and is in the book. But the interesting thing about it is when you are waking up from a coma and IV'd to morphine for over a month, the messages again of you are a body, your thoughts. It wasn't a literal thought, but again, reflecting back, that was how I picked myself back up. The community had signs all around me, La Cynthia Davis, we need you. So my purpose in life was right in front of me. And I got back up. I continued to represent that kid. I got a large law firm to assist in obtaining his freedom and Deborah Munn's Park. And he eventually was freed. And in this mode of receiving all these accolades, she's going to be a future senator. I was on the school board at the time. I met my longtime husband. We have been separated, happily divorced now for 5 years, and we co-parent today. Yet it was in this like fighting mode in my heels, having just been in a wheelchair maybe, 8 months before, that I met him, and I was further catapulted into the public eye, and it further just marked this way of life is working. And when early childhood trauma flashbacks began to enter, chronic pain began to consume me, the public life just never sit well. I was never prepared for that. I reached out for help in the midst of running for higher office at Kaiser for what I recognized was increased drinking to manage all of that. And it was there that I met a gentleman that I thought I could trust, that I thought was a peer, that I thought was the only kind of real human connection that I had. My husband and I separated for a short time, and I began an intimate relationship with that man. And over a month's time, I realized something was off, something was wrong. I used a drug and became addicted to that drug. And
you're talking about that guy now, that drug?
No, I'm talking about two things.
Oh, okay.
I'm talking about what I refer to in the book as the quote unquote, the devil's drug. And that is an amphetamine. But this individual, I now know, saw, a deer with headlights on the road and had this kind of MO, and really utilized, I placed myself in jeopardy by using this drug. And under the influence, this person saw who the Lockyers were and really began to exploit us and took intimate photos, blackmailed us, in that we were trying to reconcile, my husband and I. And I think if at that point I knew how to get help outside of living a public life, the rest of the story may be different. But what happened is it became interpreted in an extremely judgmental way. And there was no looking into what is this person's human struggles right now? What is causing her to do all of this? And in the midst of an 8-month span, my brother had severe mental health struggles. He attempted to take his life under our roof. I lost a child, the kid that we had so vigorously worked to free, who was freed, was hit and struck by a car. And I just didn't know I didn't know where to start. I didn't know what to do. And that's when I reached out for help and when I met this individual. And those were all the things that I was struggling with. But what happened was the press interpreted it as a drug and sex scandal. And I became suicidal, knowing that all along, I was just this little girl that wanted to save the world, that was a good person, that fought for justice and fought to save other people's lives. And how on earth can the universe be so cruel? how on earth, what is here in this life to believe in? And that experience truly brought me to my knees. I did attempt to pick myself up again on that self-will, in that survival mode multiple times. But the public shaming, again, consumed me every time I tried to recreate my life professionally and also as a mom. It just consumed me. And so while there were years of progress, and I was introduced to 12-step recovery, I was introduced to A Course in Miracles, I began kundalini yoga trainings and was certified, and some therapy began, I could not really recover and begin to feel love and joy and happiness until I created what I call a home within me. And it is from this place where every day I can choose between love and fear and judgment. And I started here because it really was what I always wanted. And what we all want as a child is like a place of calm and clarity and refuge. And it's also what I wanted to always give to my children. And so when I needed to get the help for trauma and addiction recovery, and I had to be separated from them, it was, again, this longing to give them the sense of a home that I was unable to give, that resulted in relapses. And so all of this combined together, eventually, through lifting the layers of those core wounds and trauma therapy, intensive trauma therapy, that home just began to expand. And it wasn't a choice of, okay, I am committed to sobriety. I am committed to awareness of these trauma triggers from a place of desperation that my mind was creating. Now it's a commitment to this connection to the infinite truth that was never changed by anything that happened to me, by anything that happens to us, or any branding or anything. And so I call it a home within because it's really from this middle ground that I can tap into all the different things that came my way. I was very blessed to have all these different learnings, but the book encapsulates that journey and how somebody can really find their own road and their own way to find a home within, most of all by banning shame.
Well, I've talked on my podcast and also in my book about how having 7 children, being the youngest of 7 children, like, there just isn't enough to go around. I mean, even if you want to, you're a mother, right? You have 3 kids, and it's hard when you are trying to take care of yourself, which is job one, because without you taking care of yourself, there's nothing there anyway. But when there are 7 kids, trying to find a way to meet the emotional, psychological, and spiritual needs of every child is pretty much impossible to do. There's only 24 hours in a day. And as you might remember, being a child and having children of your own, it's like what children want more than anything else in the world is time, attention, and energy from their parents. That's what they want. You referred to this when you were talking about your father. In a way, he was like a higher power to you. He was somebody that you could look up to, that you could, say, that's a guy, he's the guy, and I want to be like him. How much, it's like, what, can you talk a little bit about that relationship with your father and how, even at a young age, you decided that, that's the guy, that's who I want to be like?
Our relationship was interesting because it wasn't the quantity of our conversations. It was the short snippets of the quality. And he was busy. I mean, he was an attorney and he led a ton of community efforts. And it was more this aura, this sense of what he believed in. And it was justice and warmth and observing him. And he represented the good. And also he was the only one who I really saw using music, using different ways to actually feel and enjoy life. You know, he was a jazz musician, and I there was something about my dad that was the most human thing in the household. And when my father had a drinking problem that I don't think affected me, other than I saw a very unhealthy way to learn how to cry. I mean, the moments where there was somebody actually showing their feelings, it was a handful of when I saw my dad pour a drink and sit down and watch his basketball, and his eyes would tear. Now, and then he'd look at me and it was like, I get you. There wasn't a lot of communication until a little bit later in life. And that was when I was at UCLA, as well as that first year in law school. And it was kind of like an I get you, a looking me in the eye and me looking him in the eye. I just knew that we got each other. And I think I was also, you know, the only child that experienced discrimination and, you know, was the fighter for justice and causes. And so I think he saw himself in me. And, you know, my mom grew up in the war and had little nurturing herself and really no way of walking through her own feelings. My father didn't either, but he had these outlets of music and of drinking. It's funny that I'm saying that the drinking was his outlet, but he had these ways of showing his emotions. And I don't think my mom could with 7 kids. The only time that I saw her cry was later in high school in the backyard outside and hiding it. And so my father was doing something with his pain, and I replicated that.
So your mother was German, right?
Yeah, she's still.
And she came here from Germany?
Yes, my mother had been engaged to a GI, and then she broke that off. It was an abusive relationship. And then her sister married a GI and came to the States. And so my mom, having to get away from this relationship in Germany, came to visit her sister. And she met my father after he played a jazz gig in a restaurant. She didn't speak any English, is absolutely stunning. 5'2". I don't look like her at all. 5'2", blonde hair, blue eyes. And well, people say I look like her, but, you know, she saw my dad staring at her, thought he was creepy. And the rest is history. He followed her to the restroom and gave her sister his number, and they went on a first date and used a dictionary and to communicate. She was really his rock in so many ways, with managing apartments and helping early on with 3 children while my father was in law school. And they were a workhorse team to get, to having 7 kids in 9 years, from an apartment to a home, in Orange and Villa Park. And so they loved each other. They really loved each other, and had their own issues and battles, and much related to my father's drinking, which again, in my experience, I did not see a lot of the effects of that until later in life.
And so, in keeping with how trauma affects children, all of that trauma you just came into. The trauma was already going on, that, well, there's not enough to go around for this emotional stuff. And you, I think you're brighter than the average bear. And so, it seems like what you did, and I know I can't help myself from being a therapist. That's what I've done my whole life. Okay. But I'm trying to stay, more like a podcast person, but like you were at the end, I have this image of this little sweet little cute little girl standing there looking at these 6 siblings, mom and dad, and, not really having a lot of personal interaction. Like nobody's saying, hey, Nadia, let's sit down and read a book. Let's go on a walk. Let's go play at the playground. That wasn't happening. There just wasn't time. So you viewed them as what you thought the world viewed them as, and made, what children do is they make up like bigger than life, because their parents are bigger than life. Let's face it, right? So bigger than life realities about that, and connected to that. And not that your parents weren't, parents do the very best they could. And I know you have, and I have, and, anybody that's been a parent, unless they're sadistic people, we try really hard. And there was something about the way Dad did it that was more powerful to you. And sitting back there going, that is, I'm connecting to that.
It was what I saw outside of the house. It was purpose and worth, and again, the good in the world. It was this goal for the future. So it was that roadmap. Now, my mom was extremely organized, and
I bet.
and so in some way in my mind, it was also, I'm going to be that way. And so combine the two, you get me. It's organized, list maker, and then, goal setter, getting things done. My greatest skill is bringing people and resources together. Well, who was that? That was also my mom. And then it was, the mission to help people. And I think as a child, when I wrote the book, it was hard to come up with a lot of detailed memories because of the brain trauma, the brain injuries, as well as the trauma. And I didn't understand a lot of that. And it really wasn't until I did EMDR, and that's how I understood this image that was in the closet and me in the world. And when I look back, no, there wasn't that looking in the eye that I make a concerted effort to do with my 7-year-old twins today. Like, what's really going on? And
sure.
And I'm identifying feelings. There was no teaching of that, and I forgive them for that. And back then, the healthy attachment, the secure attachment, and that just wasn't there. It was me and my outside work and image at the age of 5.
Right. Wow. Well, I would like to pick up this vein again when we talk again, and if that's okay with you, And we'll talk about more about how that connection that you have with yourself and, through your parents, how that has brought you to where you are today. So until next time, home is within you.
It truly is.
Thank you for listening to the Dr. Donna podcast here on the Experience of the Soul podcast channel. This channel is made possible because of listeners just like you. If you would like to support the channel with your tax-deductible contribution on an ongoing basis or through a one-time gift, head over to experienceofthesoul.com/support. The Dr. Donna podcast is copyright 2023 Dr. Donna Bevan-Lee, all rights reserved. Our theme music is composed by Dave Croft and used with permission. The Experience of the Soul podcast channel is a production of 818 Studios.
Hey friends, Sean here, your Experience of the Soul producer. I want to take a moment to tell you about something truly exciting. The Soulworks online community, created by your host, Cynthia Alice Anderson, and available on the Mighty Networks app. If you're looking for a place where you can explore your spiritual path, connect with others, and grow in a meaningful way, then this is for you. Soulworks is so much more than an online community. It's a safe, inclusive space for spiritual exploration, self-discovery, and personal transformation. Inside the community, you'll find everything from uplifting spiritual studies to soul-centered growth practices, meditations, affirmations, and so much more. It's a space where you'll always be supported and never judged. The best part, membership is free. You'll have access to powerful resources, inspiring content, and a supportive group of like-minded people who are all on their own unique spiritual journeys. And if you're ready to dive deeper, there are premium options available to enhance your experience with a live Monday night talk series and extended, deeper meditations. If you're seeking a place to connect, grow, and nurture your soul, we would love to have you join us in the Soulworks community and see where this journey can take you. Visit my.soulworkscommunity.com today.